Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from today. And welcome to Cannabis Business Times' Grower Spotlight, a series in which we highlight cultivation leaders from across legal markets to hear firsthand accounts of trials and tribulations, success stories, as well as predictions and plans for the future of the cannabis industry. I'm Cassie Tomaselli, contributing editor and programming director for Cannabis Business Times Magazine and Cannabis Conference, which will be returning this year to Las Vegas, August 23rd through the 25th, and registration for Cannabis Conference opens on February 1st. Before I introduce our special guest today, I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping notes. First, we'll be talking for about 45 minutes or so, during which you can drop your questions into the box below. And we'll get to as many of those questions as we can in the last segment of the interview. Additionally, this interview will be archived, so if you need to leave the event for any reason, an email will be sent out to everyone who's registered with a link to view the recording at your convenience. Today's Grower Spotlight is sponsored by Emerald Harvest, a leading provider of premium-based nutrients and supplements for the high-yield hydroponic gardens, and we thank them for their support in making this event possible today. You can learn more about Emerald Harvest and their products at emeraldharvest.co, and you can also talk with them in person at Cannabis Conference this summer. And now I am pleased to welcome today's Grower Spotlight, Ryan Johnson of Vant Garden. Ryan is a career entrepreneur, having founded more than 10 successful companies spanning several industries, including internet advertising, software development, skincare products, high-level disinfection, and integrated pest management. From 2015 to 2017, Ryan made his foray into the cannabis industry by consulting on IPM for Colorado's nascent cannabis industry for more than 30 licensed cultivation operations while complying with the Colorado Department of Agriculture's very strict regulations. Today, he serves as the co-owner and operating manager of Vant Garden, a Tier 1 5,000 square foot licensed cannabis producer based in Oak Ridge, Oregon. Cultivating within a pharmaceutical grade clean room facility with proprietary methodologies of superior environmental control and small room harvest batching, Vant Garden produces high THC flower and pre-rolls that are sold in more than 150 adult use dispensaries statewide. Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. We're thrilled to have you.
Thank you, Cassie, for having me.
So Ryan, let's begin the segment with learning a little bit about your background, which has fascinating applications in both the public and private sector. So can you walk us through your professional career before you entered the cannabis industry?
I won't waste too much time in going into my previous 9 companies, but before I joined the cannabis industry, I was with the Department of Defense as a civilian contractor, doing what sounds fancier is under CBW program, which is chemical and biological warfare. And so what a lot of that entails is extreme high level integrated pest management for the protection and saving the lives of humans. I did a 9-year career with that, and a lot of that was applicable to the cannabis industry. Most of what my job and my career with the DoD was killing mold and mildew after water intrusion, natural disasters like Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina, and or the elimination of pests like the tsetse fly to control the dengue fever, as well as the ongoing malaria problem with mosquitoes, and being able to organically kill pests without harming villagers, without harming humans. There was also some work done with the WHO in creating environmental stopgaps that when they were working on the Ebola virus in Sierra Leone, where I created different protocols and SOPs to protect the doctors and nurses for the WHO from contracting the Ebola and being able to go home and not have to live in a PPE suit, a Class A PPE suit. And all those things were applicable to the cannabis industry. And so after my 9-year career with the DoD, I decided to take what I had learned and apply it to cannabis. And so I originally moved to Colorado Springs, and for the 2 years there, I was an integrated pest management consultant, like you described, with 30 different Colorado grows there, some of the larger grows. I'll leave name dropping out of it, but they were the 30 largest indoor cultivators in the world at the time. And so not only was I assisting them on controlling, never eliminating, the only way to eliminate pest and mold and mildew is to do it from the ground up before you even build your facility, but it was basically a monthly control of their integrated pest management so that they could maintain their harvest without losing them to mold, mildew, or pests. And so that gave me a front row seat really on learning from how they had built their structures, how they had set up their SOPs, learning from their successes and failures, and also getting a front row seat on cultivating this plant. Most of them were doing hydroponic at the time. And so I was, again, given a front row seat in education for 2 years on their success and failures as growers. And so that's really how I made the shift from the DoD and took what I learned from the DoD and learned in the SOPs that I'd written for those pests and mold and mildew and applied them to the cannabis plant. And so for the 2 years I was in Colorado, I was real successful at helping the largest indoor cultivators in the world control their pests and mildew and getting a front row education is what I was doing more than anything.
Absolutely. So after working in Colorado for those couple of years, obviously you're now in Oregon with your own operation. So what inspired you to kind of go out on your own and build or retrofit your own facility? And at the time, what was very appealing about the Oregon market?
So that's kind of a two-part question. So I had actually originally planned to go to Colorado and start my first grow. Was talked out of it by Justin Jones, who's one of the co-founder and owner of Dank, which is one of the most successful grows. He allowed me to use his grow there as kind of a proving ground for a lot of my theories and methodologies. So he talked me out of it doing a grow in Colorado, which was my original plan. And then after 2 years of education, we moved on to Oregon. Originally was considering Colorado, but at the time, Colorado was very saturated with grows. They were about to put a moratorium to issuing a new license. And so the cost structure and everything expanded out to Oregon. I'd looked at Nevada. I'd looked at Arizona to do a medical grow. And Oregon was appealing because I found the right location, because I found the right property for the right price. And it was an open market at the time. They were issuing grow license, not easily or not quickly like in the other state, but I felt like we could achieve the goal of getting it operating, getting licensed, and I found the right location. So we pulled the trigger and decided to move forward in Oregon.
Absolutely. So you had mentioned that you had found the right location and at the right price, and your location is very unique to cultivation facilities. So can you tell me about your cannabis facility in Oregon today? What did it used to be, and what were the steps that you took to retrofit it into a grow operation?
Yeah, so in Colorado, again, it was like a proving ground. It was like a learning. It was like a master's degree in cultivation and setting up the right cultivation. So what I determined and built theory. These were all, 7 years ago, I was in Colorado. These were theories I was building on, finding out new ways to cultivate. I'm a real disruptor when it comes to any industry that I go into, and I like to do things different than the way anybody else has done them, and prove that I can do them better, more efficiently. And what I had learned in Colorado from those other grows as I was consulting with them was small room growing was going to fit my criteria of superior environmental control. And creating biological stopgaps to ultimately create a pharmaceutical grade clean room environment. And so what matched that was having a bunch of small grow rooms linked together. And so ultimately we bought a hotel. Me and my partners bought an old hotel just outside of Eugene in Oak Ridge, Oregon. It was a roadside motel, and we retrofit it to create the triple biological stopgaps and then have individual room growings. What I had learned in Colorado again was the smaller the room, the easier it is to control pests, molds, and mildew because you have a much less chance for cross-contamination. And in the event that life finds a way, and life will find a way, you don't have this situation where you've got a room with tens of thousands of plants in them that now you've got to figure out a way to kill the pests or molds and mildew because they found their way in through your biological stopgaps. You just take it as a loss. You cut down the plants, you burn down the room, you disinfect the room, and you just call it a day and you move on, as opposed to trying to treat the plant and spray the plant with all of these possibly illegal pesticides and fungicides, or even using the ones that are legal and the ones that are approved that are essential oils that I did not want to use. The goal of the theory that I had built while in Colorado was to create a grow that had such superior environmental control that the need for pesticides and fungicides didn't exist, and that you don't have to use them. And then that was kind of the start progress that led to so many other things at this hotel in Oregon. You know, it was original. I'm going to find out a way to not use pesticides and fungicides. And then I'm going to find out a way to create such a perfect environment based on the likes of that strain that I can give the perfect environment with zero stress to the plant. And the stress could be either from using approved integrated pest management, essential oils, or even some light chemicals, and eliminate that. And then while at the same time giving the plant the absolute perfect environment that that strain wants, what humidity, what temperature, what par on the light. My theory at the time, I couldn't grow tomatoes in the backyard before I jumped this foray. But my theory was, if you gave the plant a perfect environment and didn't have zero stress, would it create a superior product at the end of the day? And so that's why we chose the hotel, because it was, the cost structure was already set up. It was the plumbing was all in every room. There were electrical upgrades. The walls were already built out. And so it saved me a lot of money on barrier to entry to not have to build out all those walls. And it was a lot easier retrofit than just building from the ground up.
Absolutely. Lots of threads that we can pull there. But first, maybe let's start by going into a little bit more detail of what that retrofit process was like. You talk about how, kind of the walls and those separations and those stop gaps, as you mentioned, were already built in. But obviously a hotel is not the same as a grow room. So what were some of those major adjustments that you needed to make sure that, you had, the flow that you needed, the energy loads, all of that kind of stuff, if you can speak more to that.
Right. So really it was, if you can imagine, like a big U-shaped one-story hotel, roadside motel, where all the rooms faced exterior to the parking lot. And so basically we put in walls that enclosed we created hallways, a wall that went in front of the overhang where all the rooms were facing to the parking lot. So they were all closed in. And then at the end of that master hallway, on both ends of that master hallway, we put 3 stopgap rooms. So one side was like a suite and an office, and the other side was like the owner's suite and another. And so you have this U-shaped, basically, facility with a bunch of hotel rooms. At the end of each U, you have 3 rooms where they have 3 different walls that go through. And so the more stopgaps you can put from biological, because obviously everything's coming in from the outside. And so everything had to go through a stopgap, and every room has its different air purification and sanitation, a lot of them proprietary, a lot of stuff that I use of government developed products. And that created it from coming into the front door. And then what we did in each room is we went to the bare minimum, which was actually 0 in Oregon, which is another appealing thing about Oregon, where the grow rooms are, think of them as a bunch of small grow rooms. Basically, each one of our flower rooms has 24 flower plants in it. And so there is no shared air in each one of those rooms. The air that's in there is recirculated. Each room has its own HVAC unit inside the room. Each room has its own dehumidifier. Each room has its own air purifier. Each room has everything in it, lights, fans, everything. And the only thing that goes from room to room throughout a normal course of business, like today, every day, is the employees. And so it was a perfect setup and be able to, in theory, control the environment, be able to recirculate it. We ran CO2 through a daisy chain. We dropped down through the attic in every room, sealed those off. We went through more foam sealant. At one point in time, we bought all the foam sealant and all of the caulking in the entire city of Eugene. We're doing the build out. We had bought every single one at every hardware store in town and basically sealed it off like a submarine, like a biodome almost kind of environment. And so that we can employ, because, again, what I'd learned in Colorado was, if you can stop things from getting in or getting out or getting introduced, then you're not going to have to use anything to kill them once they do get in. And it worked. It took about 2 years to dial it in, but it did work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. For our folks who may be joining who aren't as savvy with like sanitation technology, can you just from a 30,000-foot view explain what a pharmaceutical clean room environment really is, and what are some of those important, besides the physical barriers, what are some of those other important practices that would qualify it as like a clean room facility?
Yeah, I mean, it's really what it boils down to from just kind of a layman's perspective is stopping anything from getting in or out, having those stop gaps stuck in and out, and then constantly turning. The faster you can turn over the air in a room, then the faster you can control the environment. And we employ a lot of things. We use triple HEPA air scrubbers. We use negative ion generators. And we turn over the air in each one of our grow rooms about every 35 seconds. You hear a lot about it now with COVID in the press, especially with air travel, of how the airplanes, which I wrote a lot of the SOPs and stuff that are being used on planes now with COVID, is the faster you can turn over the air. You hear Sam and that. They've upgraded their air filtration systems in airplanes. It's very similar to understand that. The faster you can get this molecule in air to go through a scrubbing situation to clean it before it kicks it out, then the better chance you have of catching everything in that room and keeping it clean. And again, every time you open that door, is a problem. And the less times you have to open that door, the less employees you have to have, the less, all those things create things like efficiency and lower costs. But more importantly, the less introduction you have into those rooms, the more you can turn over the air in those rooms, the better chance you have of screening them. Then on top of that, how do you clean and sanitize after every turn? Obviously, we run our flower rooms 8 weeks to the day. And what you use to clean the room, are you using things that are going to kill molds and mildews that might have generated systemically from within the plant, like a PM? How clean is your process? Are you using a drip system, a deep water culture? We use a modified ebb and flow system because I found it was the easiest to clean after each one. We originally had employed a drip system, and I got rid of that because it's extremely difficult to clean all those little lines. And when you're talking about introducing nutrients into a room you're trying to keep clean, it's very difficult because everything grows on that nutrients, including systemic born molds and mildews. You've got drains. We got drains in every room. Every hydroponic place has to have a drain. So we've got introduction of possible mold and mildews coming up out of the drain. We bleach our drains every day. Every day we pour bleach down the drains. It's part of our room SOPs that I think we'll get into later. So I can go on for hours and hours about what we do and what I continuously employed over the 2 years as I was dialing in Avant-Garde. And I still wouldn't cover everything that we did.
Absolutely. I know it's hard for any grower to explain their process in 45 minutes or less. Right. But I appreciate you sharing as much as you have so far. So you had mentioned 8-week harvest schedules and or flowering schedules and things of the like. So maybe we can get into that a little bit more. If we could just talk about like what the workflow looks like in a cultivar specific room, how many employees do you have going in and out of those rooms, and what does your schedule look like?
And so we have a weekly perpetual harvest. And so we have 4 weeks in veg, 8 weeks in flower, regardless of the strain. I'll kind of start there. I had read a lot about this strain grows better if you leave it 6 weeks or 5 weeks in veg under 24 hours of light. And this is an 8-week harvest in flower, a 10-week harvest flower. I didn't believe that from the get-go, and I proved it to be untrue. The strain doesn't matter. If you control your environment and your light and your par, and you give the plant such stress-free life, you can tell it to flower as fast or as short as you want to. I matched it to what's a common kind of middle ground, and it turned out to be proof for my strains and my grow. That is, if you do it right and give the plant perfect stress-free life, you can do whatever you want with this plant. You can increase temperatures, humidities, par on the light meter. You can increase nutrients and different things. I dialed it in to match that because it would match a consistent SOP residual flow. And so we harvest 48 plants every week, all year long. 48 plants every week. It's unfortunate that plants don't understand what holidays are, although employees do, but we harvest 48 plants every week. Basically, in a nutshell, like I said, we have 24 plants in one hotel room and 24 plants in another hotel room. And so that equals 1 week's harvest. And what that allowed us to do is, in a nutshell, that I have 16 flower rooms. Well, there's some suites in there that make that variable change, but in a nutshell, I basically have 16 flower rooms, and each one is set off in each week. And that allows me to harvest every week. And then we have the same thing. I've got basically 4 veg rooms. One that's in week 1, that's week 2, and that's week 3, and week 4. Now we don't move the plants from room to room. They're just in that week in that room. And so right now, at any given point in time for the last 5 years, well, say call it 3 years, is we have plants in every life cycle. We've got 48 plants in week 1 of veg, week 2 of veg, week 3 of veg, 4, and then off the flower 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what that created was a perfect proving ground, because I didn't have to wait months before I could tell if slight adjustments were making a positive or negative impact on the plant, because it gave us basically a massive weekly R&D schedule. And so by doing that, by spreading it out like that, and harvesting every week, we figured out how to clone, and we cloned, but I'll get into clones in a second. I think that's the next question you have. But we allowed that to spread it out, and by spreading it out and having all the small room grows, it created massive efficiency. And we'll get to it later with a couple of your later questions. And efficiency is the key to the game here. Being clean, using less cost, but efficiency is the key to the game here, because it drives the cost per pound out the door through the floorboard. And so we harvest 48 plants a week, every week, all year long, and we get them planted, harvested, trimmed, cured, dried, packaged, and out the door with 4 employees. And we do it in less than 1,000 square feet of flower canopy. Our license in Oregon is done by Flower Canopy. And our license might go to 5,000, but we're only growing right now in under 1,000 square feet and can harvest that because we can spread those times, or because we can spread those duties out. You'd asked about what does a daily look like? So every day of the week, my SOPs that I dialed in do the same thing. So I've got 2 gardeners, and then I've got 2 harvest trim techs, and they do the same thing every day of the week. Every Monday, they do the same thing. Every Tuesday, they do the same thing. Every Wednesday, every Thursday, every Friday. I don't want to get into nutrients. I think we do that later. And so by having that small room grow and having the employees, it created massive efficiency. I know grows that harvest about the same amount of weight as we do a year, and they have 40 employees, and we can pull it off with 4. And efficiency is the key of the game, as we have a unfortunately price deflating marketplace. As this price continues to come down, it's the number one thing that puts most people out of business, is they didn't write the SOPs from the beginning to create efficiency to keep up with a deflating price market.
Mm-hmm. Well, that leads really nicely into our next question, because one part about it being efficient is understanding your grow environment. So could you share a little bit about how you really keep track of the environmental data in each of those rooms, and how you use those different segments to make sound business decisions?
Yeah. So every day we have a punch list. We have a checklist, similar to what you would see in a hospital at the foot of a patient's bed, the patient's chart. And we have those on the door of, it's a clipboard on the door of every room, and it's 2 pages long, and there's everything in the room is checked. Everything from the humidity level, the temperature level, to make sure the dehumidifiers work, to make sure temperatures working. They check the pumps, the timers. There's endless amounts of equipment that is in the rooms. The dehumidifier, everything that's in there, the CO2 levels, everything is checked every day in every room, 365 days a year. And if you have good employees, which we do have unbelievable employees at Avant Garden, as long as they do their job and check it every day and check everything and make adjustments to the equipment, because equipment's going to fail. And if you're not checking it every day, you're not going to notice it. And in the hydroponic system, it doesn't take more than 24, 48 hours, the whole room will die if one little thing is off, or it will create lower yields, or create lower THCs when one thing is off. So our SLPs include checking every piece of equipment and the plants, and massively examining the plants and grooming the plants every day in every room. And again, by spreading it out in all these small room grows, I was able to pull it off with just 2 gardeners,
It's fascinating. So what factors play into your genetic selections for these rooms then? I would imagine that it affords you probably a little bit more flexibility in what you're able to choose by kind of cordoning off different varietals. So if you could just kind of expound on that a little bit, and what your genetic offerings are like at Avant Garden.
Right. So I had probably bought clones from 12 different genetic cloners in Oregon as I was starting this. And we ultimately settled on Archive. And for the last, I'd say 4 years now, we've grown nothing but Archive Oregon. I would give a shout out to Mac there. They do an unbelievable job. I tried to clone, I figured out how to clone good and still scrapped my cloning methodology that I figured out how to do because they do such a good job there. And so what I got out of Archive's clones was consistency. They were consistent in yield and they were consistent in THC. Now, THC again is another thing that most growers or even genetics guys think that's inherent in the plant. Again, I didn't agree with that. I thought again, if you gave the plant a perfect environment and zero stress, absolutely zero stress, it would create a better, stronger, higher yielding plant. And so, how I choose which Archive clones we drop is we run stress tests through them. We'll grow them, and by week 3 or 4, I'll be able to tell what the yield is, and we'll either keep that or not. And so it wasn't about as much as we make adjustments in these rooms to the flower. It was about matching strains that love my environment, because not every strain loves my environment. I can make adjustments left to right. It's just not going to yield. There's certain strains that I love personally that I just won't grow because they don't yield. And so as far as selecting the strains, it was about yield. As far as about strength and THC, that has to do with your environment, in my opinion. And that's what I've proven. The nutrients play into it some, and we'll get to that in a second. We'll start talking about Emerald Harvest. And that does play somewhat in a factor to it. But it's your environment, a stress-free environment. It was a theory 5 years ago that I could create the stress-free environment, create a higher than average yield and a much higher than average THC. And so currently we grow everything in the mid 30s. Last week was the tests that were sampled last week. We got the test results yesterday. Was a gelato, and it was over 15 pounds. We had to test it twice, two 10-pound tests each, as required by the OCC. And one was 34, and one was almost 36, high 35s. Everything we grow now in the last year. In the last year, I think we've had 2 tests, 2 weekly harvests that were under 30, and they were in the 28, 29%, including at the time, as we were told by our lab, a state record on an LA Kush cake about 4 months ago, 40.41%. And so again, everything that I put into play and really tried to dial in 2 years ago ended up creating a yield. We harvest between 15 and 20 pounds each week. That's on 8 lights. And so you're looking at 2 to 2.5 pounds per light, which is a kind of a benchmark in the industry of hydroponic indoor growing. And that's on the higher side. I think the industry average is about 1.5 to 2. We increased that to 2.5. 2 to 2.5, and our THC levels are just through the roof. I don't know of another grower in North America that has figured out how to grow everything in the 30 percentile. But again, these were theories that were put into play, and after 5 years of doing it, it should be dialed in with as much R&D and as much adjustments as we've made. But again, back to the original question, as far as selecting the genetics, we only grow what Archive grows, and we test with them, and about 1 in 5 or 6 just doesn't yield great, and so we'll remove it from our rotation and bring in the ones that do yield in that 2 to 2.5 per light.
Gotcha. Thanks so much for expounding on that. I'd like to pivot to nutrients, but first I just want to remind our audience that's joining us, we already have a couple great questions coming in, but we're probably going to talk for about 10 to 15 more minutes, and then we're going to open up for a question and answer period. So please feel free to use that Q&A button down below if you'd like Ryan to answer any of your questions. So now, Ryan, I'd like to ask you a few questions on behalf of our sponsor today, which is Emerald Harvest. How have the Emerald Harvest nutrients line impacted your crops and your operation?
It's vital. It's 100% vital. They, we probably went through at least a dozen different nutri-lines in the first 2 years I was dialing this grow in. I actually met the guys at Emerald Harvest at the 2019 MJ BizCon. I'd gone there specifically to meet them and talk to them more about it. After I was impressed with their technology, with their R&D research, I selected to go with them and have never looked back. Originally, I was testing 3 or 4 of their components, then 5 or 6, Now we use all 9 lines. They have 9 lines, and we use all 9 lines from beginning and end, and don't use anything else. It's the only thing we give the plants is the emerald harvest, all the way from beginning to end. I've made some modifications, some proprietary ones to their recommended nutrients, and I dial them in. Some strains like a little more of this, a little more of that. Obviously, that's proprietary. But it's been vital to it. It was a long task to find the guys at Emerald Harvest, and since that December 2019 meeting, I've used nothing but them.
Mm-hmm. Are there any specific features of the nutrient line or one of the 9 nutrient lines that you mentioned that you use that you find to be most important in your operation?
I'd like to single one out, but I can't. I mean, if you were forcing me to, as far as the features go, I would say the cleanliness of it. When you're talking about a hydroponic system or using a drip system in a soil setting, is the cleanliness of it. The less time you spend cleaning, the less money you're spending on employees, the more efficient you are, and the less risk you have of getting a mold or mildew or a bud rot or a clogged line. And so the cleanliness of their phosphorus, of their potash, I think it's the King Cola, is light years ahead of anybody else that I ever found. That was one of the main things that made me shift them. It was the first product I tried before I went to meet them in December 2019, was how clean their potash, how little soil buildup there was in the lines. And so that meant the world to my system, because it took my employees less time to clean after every turn. We do an ebb and flow, we do a recirculating ebb and flow system. And so we clean and refill and re-nutrient our reservoirs on a weekly basis. Well, my employees have to go in and clean those nutrients, clean the pumps, get them back in there, refill it with RO water, and get the nutrients back in there. And some of the nutrients after 3 or 4 weeks, some other nutrients would completely clog, and we would have to replace the pumps. And that's detrimental to the plants. We would have our pumps clog up. And since I switched to their King Cola and all their lines, to tell you the truth, I've got no buildup. We go through very little pumps. That saves us a lot of money on equipment and saves us even more money on man hours on trying to do it. And so the cleanliness of it and the ease of use is very, very, very good.
Great. So the next question that our Emerald Harvest team had was about the cleanliness of the products and how that's impacted you. And you've obviously touched on that a little bit as well. But if you could just touch on if the Emerald Harvest product have really helped with those higher THC numbers that you're seeing in your lab results, or how they might have assisted in that.
I'd love to give them credit for it. But when we first started using them, we were testing the 20s, and I made adjustments since. So I'm not going to try to talk them up too much. It didn't hurt. Their Emerald Goddess product, their vitamin B, which helps the uptake nutrient, I think was a vital component in getting me to higher THC numbers. What the vitamin B does, what the Emerald Goddess does, is it increases the availability of the plant's uptake. So what that product does is it allows the plant to take up even more nutrients, readily available nutrients that's been made to it by the other things. And that, as I played around with the levels of the Emerald Goddess, I was able to increase the THC. Now, there were a lot of other obviously proprietary things that I'm not going to share here that I did to get it up to that, but it was a vital part, and I could see a difference in increasing the Emerald Harvest. And they come with a consulting package too. When I think it was Michael came up from California, he went through my SOPs and was helping some of my growers about a year ago. And he determined that we needed to raise the pH, that our pH was too low in not only veg, but in the last couple of weeks of flower when the THC and the trichomes are being developed. And so they come with more consulting. It's not just that they have good products. They come with a lot of great advice because they have a lot of good R&D. They never stop evolving, kind of match my system. Never stop evolving, always be making it better, or somebody else is going to catch it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for expounding on those sponsored questions. I'd like to take a moment now to talk about the Oregon market. You're obviously in a very competitive market out west. So what are some of the ways that you find that you've been able to stand out as an operator in today's world of seemingly endless brands and endless choices? Is it more of like Are you collaborating with retailers? Does marketing play a big role in product awareness? Or is there anything else that you can share as to why consumers resonate strongly with the Avant Garden product?
I wish I could say it was we work for the same retailers all the time. I wish I could say it was marketing. My degrees in advertising and public relations. But I tried for the first couple of years. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to create sales. And so we have a presence to consumers. We have a social media presence to consumers that we build upon every day. And I wish there was a way to market to a better way that existed, in my opinion, to market to, and again, I can only speak of Oregon's marketplace, to the dispensary owners and the intake managers so that we can continue to service them. And I wish we had customers that would buy us out every week, and we wouldn't have to worry about that. How I combated it was by hiring a really, really good sales rep and by putting proof in the pudding. We believe in selling the steak, not the sizzle. And so we kind of backed away from trying to spend all this money on marketing and hiring different sales reps and trying to convince the consumers or whatever. But in Oregon, and again, I can speak in Oregon, the consumer in Oregon is very budget friendly, and they want to have as high a TH number as they can for the lowest cost per gram. And so we decided years ago to focus on the product and to make our product smell better, look better, taste better, stronger, and grow it at a lower price so that we can provide it to the retailers at a lower price so that they can sell it for a lower price. And again, in Oregon, you could charge $2,000 a pound, like we used to 4 years ago, but the retailer's gonna have to sell it for 12 to 15 a gram, and in Oregon it'll sit there and it'll take a pound to sell for a year. You're better off going with volume and lower price point and lower margins than you are scrambling to find enough dispensaries to be able to carry at that higher price point. But again, it boiled down to a better product. And that's how we combated it. And that's how we got it out there. And that's how we built our brand. Because of everything that we've done, because I'll back up a little bit that I didn't touch on the growing, because we don't spray anything, because we don't have to spray any foliar on our plants. We don't use any foliar nutrients. We don't have to. We don't use any integrated pest management. We don't use any oils or essential oils. And those that I've proven are bad for the plant. The cannabis is a sponge, and it's going to soak up everything that you spray on it. And if you have to spray essential oils, then that translates to a bad user experience. Oils are not good to smoke. And it changes the flavor of the product, changes the smell of the product, and it takes away from the THC. It burns up trichomes underneath those hot lights, underneath the bright lights. And so, again, that was a big part of making our product stand out differently. Our product doesn't, when you go to our grow, it doesn't smell like cannabis, like the nose is used to smelling cannabis. It doesn't smell skunky. It doesn't smell skunky when we do it. That's oils you're smelling that are burning. Our grow smells like a purple punch will smell like a cheesecake factory. Memory loss will smell fragrant like the perfume counter at your local department store. Those are the true smells of the cannabis plant that have been masked for years by spraying chemicals or nutrients, which are fish oils, or essential oils like a thyme or a neem or a cinnamon or oil as an integrated pest management. And that's translated to most consumers, every consumer, thinking that that's part of the cannabis flower, and it's not. Cannabis shouldn't make you cough, and it shouldn't smell skunky. It's a flower. It's a fruity flower in some cases. It's a fragrant flower in others, and that's the way the cannabis plant should smell. And that's where we differentiated ourselves and built our brand, was by creating a product that was a lot more consumer friendly.
So my next question for you is a question that we ask every cover story in our Cannabis Business Times magazine, which is, as a cannabis cultivator in the industry today, what keeps you up at night?
Yeah, I saw that. And I mean, I could read that every day and give you a different answer every day. You know, a couple of years ago, it was, how many pumps are going to go out? Is the AC going to fail? What light bulbs do I need to be changed this week? It's endless. I had insomnia for the first 3 years because I couldn't sleep because it was just so stressful thinking about what's going to go wrong today. As an industry as a whole, right now, it's what decisions do I make on the future of Avant Garden? Based on building upon our success, and really at this, when are we going to federally legalize, and what can I do? I've lobbied successfully in both Oregon and Colorado. as well as Arkansas, for this industry? And what can I do tomorrow to help push us closer to that federal legalization, which I think is imminent, but the sooner the better, especially now with what's going on in our economy, what's going on with the world right now. I'm shocked that the government hasn't pushed the federal, but right now, it keeps me up at night. What can I do tomorrow to help push us closer to federal legalization?
Gotcha. Thanks so much for sharing. Alternatively, what helps you sleep at night as a cultivator? What gives you peace of mind?
Knowing that I've got a great staff and that the 5 years paid off, that my theory and all the money that we put back, that me and my partners put in to get to my theory was going to work out, and that it worked out. And that, you never know when you come up. I come up with a lot of outlandish ideas. I'm an inventor, I'm a patent holder. And I put together a theory 5 years ago that I could do, that I could figure out how to grow this plant the way that we've discussed today. And so it helps me sleep at night, seeing the sales come in, seeing the product go out, and hearing feedback from consumers saying, this is the best product I've ever smoked. Hearing consumers that respond to us on our social media platforms and bringing them joy, going, what did you do? How did you do this? How does your product taste and smell? How are you growing it this strong? And so that helps me sleep at night. Now, finally.
We obviously have people joining us from all over the country, all over the world in certain aspects. So what advice would you give to a current or prospective cannabis cultivator today, regardless of where they're operating?
I would say efficiency, because even when they open up state lines, I would say base your numbers based on, you're going to grow half as much as you think you are, and you're going to get half as much per pound for it. Because the name of the game for survival and longevity is efficiency. And, I've consulted with a lot of grows over time. I still plan on consulting with more in the future because I love it so much and put so much in this industry. It's about efficiency. It's about figuring out how to grow this plant at very low cost, so that you're prepared for a constantly deflating marketplace. The price keeps coming out. So my advice would be figure out how to cut your costs and be prepared to get half as much next year as you're getting this year. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately.
So what's on the horizon for Avant Garden, if you can share?
That's one of the things that keeps me up at night, obviously. I'm kind of a visionary, obviously. I think you see that. We have room to expand, up to 5 times what we're growing right now. We've built out the plans to grow it, to expand in Oregon. Do we expand in Oregon? Do we sell? We are actually flirting with a couple of the big boys in the industry to sell out, to sell not just the grow and the profitability, but the intellectual property that we've developed on how to grow this plant. And so do we expand ourselves? Do we go public, or do we sell off? And that's kind of the crossroads we're at right now with me and my partners. Is we're entertaining other grows. We're also entertaining expanding privately. We're entertaining taking the company public, and or doing consulting. And so, to the people watching today, I'd say if those are things interesting to you, feel free to reach out to me. Can you put up my email address? Feel free to share my Ryan at a-vant-garden.com email.
Sure.
And if there's even a sponsor interested, pop that up and share it to everybody. It's Ryan at a-vant-garden.com. We're real lucky. We're real lucky to be in this position, especially with all that's going on in this industry, especially in Oregon, especially with COVID and everything, to have survived this and to have figured out what we figured out. And so now we're really lucky and very blessed, feel very blessed to be able to have to make these tough decisions now moving forward, that either we want to sell it off to somebody else and allow them to expand on it, or expand upon it ourselves, or start taking on consulting jobs to help other growers do it. And it might be a combination of all three. We'll probably decide in the next 30, 60 days.
Mm-hmm. Oh, very soon then. So my last question, and we've kept pretty good time. I'm very surprised. Usually I run over, but we're at about the 45-minute mark.
I can be long-winded.
We touched on, your thoughts and your the need for federal legalization and for that to happen soon. But I'd love to hear just more broadly, what are your predictions for the cannabis industry in the next 2 to 3 years?
Hopefully in those next 2 to 3 years, we'll achieve we'll get it federally legalized. I think that we're on the course now with both the SAFE and the MORE Act, the SAFE Act being the Banking Act and the MORE Act being the decriminalization. I think that'll be a huge step if we can get those two pushed through, which are in Congress now. We can get those passed the Senate and signed off by the president. Then I think that will open up state lines. I think what you'll see once those two go through, hopefully they can get those pushed through by the end of the year. I'm hoping. And if when those get pushed through, then that should open the pathway for state legalized to be able to work with state legalized. As long as they're touching, I think is the way it'll happen. Like right now, we touch California, we touch Washington, we touch Oregon. When I say we, touches Nevada. I think once the SAFE and the MORE Act get pushed through, that you'll be able to see overlapping in states that touch, and that'll push through. Obviously, we've got elections coming up here at the end of the year in November. What are we at? 39, 40 states have legalized cannabis in one way state. There'll be more on the ballot here in November. Another couple will get pushed through. Will it take every state at one point at the state level before federal? I would have thought it'd been done by now, but my lobbying efforts have gone to shame. Obviously, COVID has put a big halt on everything, including this. But I see it being federally legalized, and I think that's going to open up opportunities for everybody. That will increasingly just absolutely stabilize the industry. You won't have interstate competition. You'll be able to get products that are in Oregon to people in Nevada that will pay more for a higher end product, or to New York or to California that have a more less budget friendly consumer. And so I think that's the big key in the next steps to it. I think there's plenty of great players out there at the state level to put this together. It's just a matter of getting the feds to cooperate.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for answering all of my questions today. Now I'd love to open it up to our audience to ask questions of Ryan in the last 14 minutes or so that we have here. And we already have a handful, so I'm going to start digging into them now. Our first question is, does each room at your facility have its own fertigation system, or does the entire facility get fed from a single system?
Each room has its own. And so we do an ebb and flow system on flood tables through a recirculating reservoir. And so basically, as I described earlier, there's 28 plants in each room. There's 6 plants in each tray. 24 plants in each room, 48 total for each harvest. So there's 24, 6 plants in each tray, and then they recirculate. 2 trays share a reservoir. It doesn't ebb and flow through a recirculating system underneath them. And so we wash, clean, scrub, refill with RO, and redo nutrients in each one of those reservoirs. 2 trays shares a reservoir. And so, no, it's not a central location. I originally tried that, and what I found that was it got dirty and it started creating algae. And so I'd originally tried that with these large 55-gallon huge jugs that you could do it and just pump them in and fill it and keep them circulating, but I couldn't keep the algae from building up. And so that's why I went to a recirculating reservoir, 2 flood table tray shared reservoir.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Our next question is, how long did it take you to grow to capacity?
Well, to say the capacity to get the entire grow set up where the whole flow was going, where every room was filled up, it was probably a year to a year and a half before I had it fully dialed in and had it growing where we were bringing in 48 plants on the front end and bringing 48 plants on the back end, and had all the systems and everything that was there filled out. It was a good year and a half. That kind of ties into asking earlier what advice I would give to anybody entering the marketplace or new to it is patience. If you think you're gonna grow, 3 pounds of light and get 2,000 pounds and you're gonna do it immediately, you're wrong. There's not a grow in the world that sets up and does it that way. It's a minimum of 1 year before you really get it dialed in, because there's so many variables that have to be made adjustments, and every grow is different. Every grow is different. And so, yeah, it's patience that ties into that as well.
Perfect. And just a reminder to our audience just to use the question box if you have any additional questions. You can also use the chat. We can see them there as well. The next question here is, do you use anti-lock door systems for entry to rooms?
I'm not going to elaborate on my security system. Go on.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to relay it since it was
Yeah.
asked here. And then again, this may or may not be a proprietary question, but it was asked, what do you clean your rooms with when you flush your hydroponic system?
That's borderline proprietary, but I will share that we use a lot of hydrogen peroxide. We use a lot of activated oxygen because activated oxygen is shaking. I learned that with the DoD. Was my experience with the activated oxygen, and so we use a lot of hydrogen peroxide based cleaning products.
Gotcha. Thank you. We have one audience member who asked, as you had mentioned, what keeps you up at night thinking about ways that we can advance this federal legalization. So in your mind, what are some of those things that we can do to reach federal legalization? What can growers do at their own level?
Reach out to your senators and congressmen and congresswomen. They're incredibly busy right now with everything going on with COVID. And so a lot of that's been pushed back. But the best thing you can do is reach out to your state regulators, the MED in Colorado, the OLCC in Oregon, reaching out to the state regulated communities and reaching out, emailing and mailing, hard mailing your senators and congressmen, saying, what can we do? Can we get in front of them? Can we put up presentations? Can we show the amount of tax revenue that this industry can generate, the amount of jobs, the amount of good that this product does in inhibiting or eliminating the need for opiates? And there's no mystery, and it's not that you're having to educate anymore. Everybody knows that it's there, but the more people that you have pounding as a constituent, as a voting population, telling the senators and congressmen in your regions that this is what you're looking for is going to help push up their flagpole.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We have another question here that asks, what are the microbial levels that are needed to meet in the state?
The microbial levels in the state of Oregon aren't tested. They actually don't test for mold or mildew in Oregon. They test for moisture content. And this originated back, mostly is to blame on Oregon's extremely humid and always wet weather. And so I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe that they did implement it years ago, about 6-7 years ago, before my introduction to the industry in Oregon, and everybody was failing, because it was impossible to keep a clean specimen sample from the grow to the lab without getting atmospheric mold and mildew, because it's just so wet in Oregon all the time. And so when everybody was failing, I think the OLCC immediately scrapped that. And so in Oregon, they go with a moisture content, which obviously it takes moisture to create mold or mildew. And I think it's an odd number. It's like 15.47% moisture level. And so that's what they test for on an above or fail, pass fail, as I believe it's 15.47. It's around that number. And so we've never failed that. Obviously, there's a lot of proprietary things going on in our dry and our cure rooms to me below that, but we've never even come close to fail on that.
Gotcha. Thanks for expounding on that. We have another question that says, are you interested in expanding into markets in other states? And if so, what would it take you to spark interest in doing so? And if not, why?
Yeah, that's one of the things that like I said, is keeping me up at night. Yeah, we're highly interested in looking for other partners in other states to take what we've developed at this hotel to another state. We've actually drawn up plans and spent quite a bit of money with architects drawing up plans to recreate exactly what we did with this hotel with shipping containers. And so we actually have a plan, and we may do it internally, but we're always open to look for other partners to expand to other states, to basically take the blueprint, it's literally a blueprint of what we've done, and doing it at a really, really low cost effective. You hear me talk about a lot of cost structure, a lot of low barrier to entry, a lot of efficiency. And so to expand in Oregon, we have room in what was the former parking lot of the hotel to expand and right at triple our existing production. And so we drew up plans with shipping containers. And I had drawn up plans by doing it with building a steel, prefab steel building, and then building out the interior, and then compared that cost to doing it with a lot of shipping containers, and the cost savings was dramatic. And then once me and my partners got done, it's like, well, wait a second, we don't have to do this in Oregon's parking lot. We can pick these plans up, modify them for whatever the space is based on plant count or based on flower canopy like we have in Oregon, whatever the state is. And so, yes, we could literally pick up the grow in Oregon and do it and duplicate it immediately in another state anywhere. And without having the delays of learning or the efficiencies or anything like that, and even probably make it more efficient than we did that because we've got more to learn from. So yes, we'd be highly interested. Email me if anybody's interested, person has that question. Feel free to email immediately. We're more than open. It's one of the things that we're looking at is expanding with other partners in other states, maybe taking the company public, possibly selling it off to somebody that wants to do it themselves.
Gotcha. Yes, and I've included your email in the chat to all of our participants here. So we've got about 5 more minutes and a handful more questions, so I'm going to try to get to them quickly. The next one is, you stated that you don't use any foliar nutrients or pesticides. Do you use any rooting hormones to establish your clones?
Not unless Emerald Harvest is sneaking them in. So no. They don't, and so that was kind of a jab at them. But no, it's not necessary. If you give the plant a perfect environment, hormones are more to build an immune system, and so, or to make the plant stronger so they can fight off things like plants and mildew. It is a part of most people's integrated pest management, but again, that's not good for the overall plant. It's like giving steroids in the end result to a human or a chicken. And so, no, we would never use any growth hormones or even any aminos to jumpstart a plant, because we don't have to. Those things help it be stronger to be able to fight a pest or mold or mildew. And we don't have that problem because I figured out a way to control the environment so well to keep those things out.
Gotcha. We have one other question that asks if you know any operators in your market or in other markets that are doing a similar model to what you're doing at Avant Garden. I would assume that he probably means by the facility retrofit.
Right. No, I don't know any. I've worked with a lot of people in a lot of states, a lot of countries, and now I don't know anybody doing what we're doing. I don't know anybody that's having. There could be somebody doing weekly perpetual. There could be somebody that's doing this. I don't know everybody in the industry, obviously, but I don't know of anybody that's getting. I don't know of anybody that's getting the results we are, and I can only ask that really in my state. I'd have to research every testing lab and ask every testing lab in every state and say, do you have another grow that tests in the mid-30s every single harvest? And are they harvesting every week to achieve those results? When I asked the testing labs, and we've been through 3 or 4, we've probably been through 5 or 6 in Oregon, none of them have ever seen what we're doing in the state of Oregon. And so that's the only ones really I can ask.
Okay. The next question is, have you always used hydroponics?
Yeah, so one of the main things that I learned in Colorado, and this is probably going to upset a lot of people that have grows on this, is soil's bad. You know, one of the main things that I learned as a integrated pest management consultant in Colorado was that it's not if, it's when are you going to get root aphids in your soil. If not two-eyed spider mites, you're going to buy root aphids and bring them into your facility. And that's not the pest you want. Root aphids are near impossible to prevent or kill. Once you know you've got them, it's too late and your entire grow will go down. Anybody that's on this call will relate to that. We actually got root aphids in my facility. We bought some clones very early on. One of the second groups of clones that I bought, I won't name any things, we bought clones that had root aphids in them, and I had to burn down my entire veg rooms to get rid of them because there is no getting rid of them once they're on the plants. And so, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. We've got a couple minutes left. So our next question is, are you interested in partnering with startup companies?
Absolutely. Shoot me an email.
Awesome. And then I just had one last question for you, just because you had mentioned some supply chain issues at the end of our discussion. It's just been a hot topic with our audience lately. So I'd love to kind of hear from you what kind of supply chain issues operationally that you might be facing today, and if there are any kind of planning adjustments or workarounds that you've been employing to kind of keep things on schedule.
Maybe we've been lucky. Maybe I should go back to the Emerald Harvest. We've had very little supply chain issues. We use Grodan Rockwool as our base, and we use Emerald Harvest. It all comes through Hawthorne. We're partners with Hawthorne's. We're actually the selected growth. We're the test facility for Grodan lights. Because of the way we're set up with side-by-side rooms, we're able to test Grodan lights, and so we are the test facility for Grodan lights. That might help. We're a test facility for Hawthorne, and so keep fingers crossed. We've been very lucky to avoid any issues. We work with Emerald Valley Gardens, which is a grow store there in Oregon, and Maddie does an unbelievable job of keeping us fulfilled. A lot of that could be due to our efficiency. We know exactly what we're going to need every month, and so we've been pre-ordering for years, and so that could play into the system, but I'd say it's a combination of a team effort, not just ours, but Emerald Harvest, Maddie at Emerald Valley Gardens, and the guys at Hawthorne and Grodan. That we all work really well together. We've been real lucky to avoid any supply chain issues.
Gotcha. Well, perfect. Well, thank you so much I got to all of our audience questions, and I even got to sneak in one extra. And we kept time. So I'm happy for that. Thank you so much, Ryan, to being a guest on our Grower Spotlight today. I'd also like to once again thank Emerald Harvest for sponsoring this presentation, and to thank all of our viewers for watching. Just a reminder once again that Cannabis Conference, where Emerald Harvest will be exhibiting, will be August 23rd through the 25th. 2022 at the Paris Las Vegas Hotel and Casino. You can find more information about that at cannabisconference.com, and registration opens February 1st. So again, thank you everyone so much for joining us, and we hope to see you next time for our next Grower Spotlight interview. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Cassie.